When I started this channel, it was just a little one-off, something I didn't really take too seriously. I mean, hell, my first videos were Minecraft driving videos. Ever since I was a kid, I've had this obsession with film, with the fascination of telling a story to an audience. I would make these dumb short movies with crappy iPhone effects with my friends about the end of the world, and I loved it. The views may have just been our parents and us several times, and the comments may have just been people telling us to please stop, but I still loved it. As the years went on, I started traveling my lovely state of Iowa, and that's when I noticed this weird thing that was going on. It was like all of the malls that I'd been going to as a kid and throughout my life were just fading away. And that's when I decided to whip my phone out and to capture them. To catch them in time before they were inevitably gone forever. Humble beginnings, you could say. I didn't really like how I sounded on camera, and for a long time, even today I'm still figuring out how to do this thing right. I discovered the wonderful world of the dead mall craze, I followed YouTubers, got inspired, and my passion grew. I would spend hundreds of dollars making these bizarre road trips across the country, knowing I would not make that money back, just so I could tell these malls' stories, because they truly are part of a generation that's forgetting they even existed. And that's the best feeling, the most rewarding feeling. The reason I keep doing this thing is because seeing my amazing audience reminisce about these malls and share the memories, well, that's what's key. There's just this fascination of seeing these big, empty buildings towering over you, making you feel small when they were once the grand meccas of generations. Ever since this whole mall thing started, there was always one mall I wanted to see. One grand dead mall. It's like each of us makes it our goal to see this place at least once in our lives, like it's some sort of bucket list destination. Forest Fair Village, or Cincinnati Mills, or Cincinnati Mall, or whatever else people call it, was one I saw on my Cincinnati expedition. I mean, I literally revolved this entire trip around this very mall. Once housing hundreds of stores as America's second largest mall ever, this $500 million disaster is one of the most bizarre malls I've ever explored. And today, we're gonna tell its story, and how the end came for this 8th wonder of the world. Before we get started, I'd like to congratulate the winners who were able to guess the next mall. Great job Funky Fresh, Alec, Cool Cat, Dan, Justin, and J.E. Now let's head in here and tell the story of Forest Fair Village and what happened to this marvel. Before we get started with the history here, I always gotta throw in my little side note. And let me just tell you how honored I felt to be here. I mean, you look up Dead Mall on YouTube and this is usually the Dead Mall. It was the one many saw for the first time that got them into the passion for these places, and to actually be here for myself was just mind-boggling. When you enter and walk through, you wonder, gosh dang, how is this place still open? From the outside, it looks like this infinite stretch of haphazardly placed and weirdly colored storefronts, and it really is just looking abandoned. The signage is falling apart and there seems to be no life. But no, those doors open, and the backstory to this fever dream, well, get ready, cause it's crazy. In the mid-1980s, Cincinnati was exploding with malls. As mentioned in the last episode, They were being built all over the metro at an uncontrollable rate, and it wouldn't slow. As the growth continued, an Australian businessman by the name of George Herskew, who was known as a very eccentric retail developer, was eyeballing attractive land right along I-275, already containing a big superstore. His development company, L.J. Hooker, would purchase the land and immediately start planning a mall out. To be laid out in a large Y shape, the mall would consist of nearly 1.5 million square feet of space, across 2 levels, making it the second largest mall in the United States behind the now demolished Randall Park Mall. Herskew's plan from the very get-go was setting the massive mall up for failure. You see, he wanted the mall to be a very upscale destination, something high-end that would be brand new to the city. He wanted brands never before seen to move in here. The only problem was that the mall was wedged in between 2 blue-collar neighborhoods, Forest Park and Fairfield. So all the high-end brands Herskew wanted, Bonwit Teller, Sakowitz, B. Altman, and Parisian, were already not wanting locations there. Plus, with the opening of the brand new, reinvented upscale Kenwood Mall, which was located in a much better and wealthier neighborhood further south, Forest Fair's future already seemed like it was in trouble. So coming up here, there's a little bit of a cut, and that's because mall security here is notoriously tight and will kick you out at the sight of anyone taking pictures, so I kind of had to watch myself, but pretty much just this long wing opens up into this 2-level atrium you see here, with the old food court underneath, which you'll see is just one of the mall's best features. But first, we gotta take a trip into liminality, one of my favorite parts of the mall, the old movie theater. One of my favorite things about this mall is how little the owner cares about some of this old stuff. Like how these outdated movie showtimes sit as if they're stuck in 2015. And down this hallway, an old payphone, long abandoned and without a line. Before we continue with the history and the opening of this behemoth, let's take a trip into the old food court, which features this nautical theme. Follow those ceilings and the waves in them, and be transported into another world, one where these seats would have all been full of hungry patrons bustling from food stall to stall, now just left with walls and the empty reminders of what once was. Forest Fair Mall would cost $200 million to build. However, due to complications, it would go nearly $50 million over budget. A big reason why this was happening was because Herskew was massively in debt. How, you might be asking? Well, you remember how I said that the upscale brands didn't want to move into the mall? So the way he forced them essentially was by buying controlling shares of each company and then forcing them to open a store at the mall hoping for success, which would only put him further into debt. Construction would take place over 1987 and into 88, with the opening date scheduled for earlier that year. However, it would be pushed back further due to even more complications. A massive Higbee's, which was planned to be a huge anchor for the mall, would pull out just before opening, leaving a hole on the lineup. B. Altman would move into that space, however, leaving their previous space empty. As opening neared, more stores that were planned to open would begin pulling out, further leaving more empty spots on the lineup. The mall would open in two phases, the first on July 11th, 1988 with the Biggs Wing. This value wing of the mall was a long, one-story stretch consisting of around 20 stores, all featuring low-end products and prices. The rest of the mall was slated to open in October of that year, but would be pushed further back and finally open in March of 1989. Going down this old wing, it just feels so bizarre. The ceilings and the huge fake chandeliers tower over you, and you're left in the dark as only a minuscule amount of light illuminates the corridors. And of course, all around you, the tarped-off glass storefronts of what was once supposed to be a fashion wing full of dozens of clothing stores. Apart from the carpets being dirty and waterlogged, it feels pristine. It doesn't really feel like this mall is even dead. You could tell me it's just closed for the night. It feels like the direct sister to St. Louis Mills, just put on a second level and call it good. And we'll get to how that all came about. One thing this mall struggles on so badly, and even then when it was still sort of popular, is just how big, empty, and abandoned it feels. And when I say abandoned, I don't mean like dilapidated building, even though, yes, you can see a little bit of that here and there, but I mean more in a shopping sense. You know, the reason malls are built. No music, stores, shoppers, or really anything. Coming up here, you'll be able to see a perfect example of this mall's dumb cheesy makeover by the Mills, with these banners that literally look like a 4th grader made them online in like 2 minutes. I mean, you can actually see the pixels in these images. Oh, so bad. And also up here, a shot of the old directory, of course unchanged for at least 6 or 7 years. And if you look closely when we get up here, you can see like where they covered old stores with blackout. So depressing. Forest Fair Mall would fully open on March 1st of 1989, and it would be a disaster. The 1.5 million square foot mall would only open with about a third of its spaces filled. And while suited men, Hershkew included, did fill the halls, fanfare would quickly die out. Elder Bierman, Sekowitz, and Bonwit Teller would all open without issue, but stranger mall tenants and more outlandish ideas would follow. A two-story food court, an Australian restaurant called Wallaby Bob's, which was the first ever brewery operating in the mall, a 1950s cafe, Oshman Sporting Goods, an 8-screen theater called Super Saver, Koala Clubhouse, which was the first licensed daycare in a mall, a massive timeout arcade, which acted more as an unconventional anchor, with mini golf, a carousel, Ferris wheel, and bumper cars, and nearly 200 other inline spaces dotted in between. The massive Biggs anchor, which was the size of a typical Walmart today, was open 24 hours, which meant that the mall had to segment itself so that part of it would close and the other part would remain open at night. It was a lot to take in by residents, and at the time of opening, the mall enjoyed mild success. However, it was nothing like Hershkew planned. The upscale clientele never came, and the overly posh mall was way out of place for where it was built. The Y-shaped Forest Fair was built with each of its wings featuring different levels of wealth. Throughout, the mall featured ornate ceilings with thousands of small bulbs, arched coppered skylights with brass trims. In the words of Jonah Norrison from Label Scar, the mall featured everything from $100 suits to banana stands. It was just 1 year after opening that the massive mall would face even more troubles. As I made my way around back towards the center court on the upper level, that's when I started to have my first troubles with the security guard. And oh boy, I'm not one to record my encounters, but I really wish I would have kept on filming this guy. So here he comes on a bike, because, you know, this place is practically an indoor city, and he is flying towards me on this bike, naturally making me poop myself a little. But he just comes up and he tells me I can't take pictures or record them all because it's quote-unquote illegal. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, sorry. You know, playing it off like I don't know. But then he tells me that if he catches me again, he'll call the cops. And I was just like, dude, chill. I'm not shooting the place up, I just like the documents. But of course, I just say, okay, sorry, and he goes back to his little patrol. And I watch him for a while, and I really wish I would have gotten it on video, but this guy just rides around the mall like he's practicing for Tour de France, like he's flying around these corners. But anyways, I just thought I'd share that little tidbit with you guys. Gotta love security in these malls. They're like the sheriffs, and they'll rough you up if you show a camera in their town. just 3 months after opening, L.J. Hooker filed for bankruptcy after being heavily in debt and making nearly no money back from the failing mall. Just after that, Hersky would be put in jail after filing for bankruptcy for shady business practices. The mall, now without an owner, would be put up for sale with an asking price of $200 million. During this time, nearly every upscale store that Hersky had forced in, like B. Altman and Sakowitz, had left, and the mall sat at a depressing 50% occupancy. Better malls like the nearby Tri-County, which was embarking on a massive renovation, was sucking away popularity from the brand new Forest Fair. In October of 1990, the mall was sold to a bank partnership called FFM, who were responsible for the loaning of the money that built the mall in the first place. As it went into the 90s, just 1 year after opening, it looked extremely bleak. Stores were leaving, and the first efforts would begin by the mall to rebrand itself. So, me being me, I decided to go ahead and make a little game out of this fun experience. Because why not? Games are always fun. This mall's ceiling is certainly showing age, and rapidly. I counted all the buckets in this video, and if one of you thinks you can guess correctly, I'll shout you out in the next episode as a special winner. And there can only be one of you, so if you think you're down for the impossible, give it a shot and let me know in the comments below. In 1993, Forest Fair would rebrand itself as The Shops at Forest Fair, a huge embarkment on reinventing the mall. The Southwest Wing would become The Fashions at Forest Fair. This wing, already containing Elder Beerman and Parisian, would focus on clothing and typical apparel stores. The North Wing, which we are currently in, would become The Lifestyles at Forest Fair, focusing on home decor, entertainment, and sporting goods. The single-level wing, already containing The Bigs, would become The Markets at Forest Fair, featuring value tenants and services. And finally, the massive center court would become The Festival at Forest Fair, featuring entertainment and new restaurants. This new vision for the mall, for a short time, would start to work, with the opening of new restaurants and stores like CompUSA, Suncoast, Doll Hires, and others. A new nightclub would also open on the upper level parking deck, however, this was only accessible through an exterior entrance. Despite the success creeping back in the mall's favor, violent things would start to happen. According to deadmalls.com, marketing twists, gang wars, and even a fire in the food court would keep the public with an uneasy eye for the mall as a safe place to shop. The theater on the lower level would become a dollar theater called Dollar Savers, and in 1994, Kohl's would open in the old B. Altman space. In 1995, the mall was once again put up for sale by FFM, being purchased by Miami-based Gator Investments in 1996. This change of hands would once again begin a mass exodus. One of this mall's massive tenants, a sort of junior anchor if you will, which we'll learn more about, was MediaPlay. And this is a very fascinating case. It was in the same ballpark as Blockbuster, Circuit City, and Kmart. Actually, yeah, mix those three together and you get MediaPlay. MediaPlay was the remnants of a scattered, dying Musicland, Sam Goody, and Suncoast brand, coming together in one last hurrah to form superstores for music and movies. They were short-lived, however, and all of their stores, including the one at Forest Fair, were shuttered by 2006. Until we get back to the center court and continue the history, I just want to leave you all with a little bit of silence. Listen carefully coming up, and those sounds aren't edited in, but somewhere in the mall, you hear the echoes of people and children. In new ownership by Gator, who promised to bring them all up to the destination it was meant to be, several of the larger tenants and anchors would close. Dahair's Comp USA and Parisian in 1998. However, a few would fill the gaps. Guitar Center, Moore's Gym, and in 2000, Bass Pro Shops. Going into the 2000s, the mall would see a small comeback, even with the closing of the Center Court Time Out amusement park. Burlington Coat Factory would open up in the old Center Court anchor in 2001, along with Media Play and Ohio's first Steve & Barry's. All these additions were in the restructuring effort to turn the mall into a destination for new and up-and-coming businesses. Other additions would be a new nightclub called Metropolis and a brand new showcase cinema opening on the second level. That's right, this mall featured 2 massive movie theaters within walking distance of each other. Why they did this is beyond me. The mall at this time was making a comeback, however, it wasn't like people had hoped. Instead of bringing a new life like Gator promised, the mall just felt like an ornate, posh environment, filled with secondhand and dollar store hybrids. The unhealthy restructuring would lead into 2002, beginning the dark era for Forest Fair, which would see that name dropped completely and be refit with the new zany, modern, and up-and-coming Cincinnati Mills. As we explore the old food court more in depth here, we really jump into that aquatic theme, and I just wanted to make sure I caught every angle of this bizarre place, which, being in the dark among these oversized buoy pillars, feels like I'm stuck in a strange liminal space, like some sort of fever dream. Anyways, back to the history. After a drawn-out dispute with Polaris Fashion Place in Columbus, Gator lost all interest in Forest Fair and sold it to the Mills Corporation in 2002, who had been oogling the mall since the late 90s. The Mills Corporation, who I've covered more in depth in the St. Louis Mills video, were a very sporadic mall company that profited off building these overly massive racetrack-shaped malls in the early 2000s.
usually filling them with hundreds of small brands and discount stores, so forest fare was really right up their alley. With the $70 million purchase of the mall, an extensive renovation would begin that would take until 2004 to complete. The mall would close in early 2003 for renovations, only leaving external anchors open. Around this time, Elder Bierman would leave, not sticking around for the reopening, and all eyes were now on the next and hopeful final reinvention of the mall. Before we opened the brand new, reinvented Cincinnati Mills, I wandered my way back into the center court and back around random parts of the mall to capture them again. And as I crept back in, the deafening silence was accompanied by a storm moving in. As distant thunder rumbled, the aging skylights began to seep water, and from all over the mall you could hear the sounds of rain and the buckets feebly trying to catch the falling water. On August 19th, 2004, Cincinnati Mills would open as a truly reimagined shopping destination. This was the most positive reception of them all, as it was now at over 75% occupancy. Nearly every mistake made during the previous mismanagements had been corrected. New anchors like Babies R Us and Johnny's Toys opened in the vacant spaces, and the mall was flooded with family-oriented tenants. The redesign of the mall features what you see today. New paint, fixtures, and theming throughout brought it up to the Mills gold standard and finally gave the Mills a place in the city as a true mall. By 2005, occupancy was up to 95%, and it seemed that the Mills had been saved. However, the outdated tenants and value anchors of the past were starting to hamper growth, and by 2006 would begin to leave. Also, new dress code rules were enacted, and groups of more than 3 were banned from the mall to hopefully bog down on those noisy teens. Although the Mills certainly saved the mall for a short time, as 2006 began, Cincinnati Mills would start to fall under yet again. 2006, trouble would begin with the closing of Media Play, which fully went out of business. Johnny's Toys would also close, and Biggs was rumored to be leaving, as the Biggs president announced that their store was no longer profitable. The potential loss of Biggs would be detrimental to the mall, as the massive Walmart-sized anchor was a major portion of the single-level wing, and finding a tenant to fill that kind of space would be nearly impossible. The Mills started to show less and less interest in the declining mall. As tenants left, traffic declined, and the Mills Corporation was found to be a part of a large accounting scandal. The company would be absorbed by Simon Properties in 2007, leaving Cincinnati Mills, say it with me, once again ownerless. In June of 2008, Biggs, the 245,000 square foot last original anchor tenant, left, leaving a massive portion of the single-story wing in the dark. As the recession began, Cincinnati Mills was spinning out of control. Wonder Park, an amusement venue, closed in March of 2008 after the manager was discovered to be paying his employees, who were minors mind you, to pose for sex videos. This disgusting behavior got him arrested. Tenants Guitar Center, Urban Behavior, Stephen Barry's, Sex Off 5th, and many, many others left, leaving the still freshly remodeled mall further empty. In March of 2009, Simon dumped the mall in the hands of North Star Realty, dropping the Mills name and simply calling it Cincinnati Mall. The new owners would immediately begin failing to make payments, leaving the mall in a slowly decaying state. The huge wings would be left in the dark and with some of the most aggressive security possible. Notoriously, these were guards who would shout from across the mall at patrons taking photos of the situation, or if there was really just any kind of behavior going on that they didn't like at all. Just a year later in 2010, Cincinnati Holdings Company would buy the mall for a measly $4.7 million. Showcase Cinemas, the upper level one, was mid-renovation at this time by Rave Theaters. However, they would pull out, abandoning the theater idea and leaving the mall entirely. This center court, featuring the oddest theming of deflated fish and faded colors, is the picnic on the river, homaging Cincinnati's river heritage. The food court lies beneath, along with the second movie theater and the security guard outpost. Thankfully, he left for a lap on his bike, and I was able to record the odd sights. Cincinnati Holdings was extremely in debt thanks to the mall. However, in 2011 would announce plans for a massive revitalization. New hotels in the vacant anchors, an ice skating rink in the old Bigs, an indoor mountain bike arena, a 76,000 square foot agriculture museum, and an indoor water park. These ambitious plans, though plausible, were simply out of reach for the company and were soon dropped. By October of 2013, the mall sat nearly 90% vacant, with long stretches of the corridors being shuttered and without any traffic. Few stores sat in between, and it was really only the center court and the food court that featured the mall's little life. That year, Bass Pro Shops announced that they'd be closing their anchor at Cincinnati Mall for a new, larger one at the nearby Union Center. However, would ultimately cancel and stay at the mall. The mall was once again renamed Forest Fair Village at this time in hopes of bringing back some life. But put quite simply, nobody cared. And nobody cared about the mall anymore. Burlington Coat Factory left, and in 2015, as the Avengers were saving the world from the apocalyptic threat of Ultron, Danbury Dollar Saver Theater, later renamed to the discount theater, The Screens, closed for good, leaving the mall with 2 abandoned theaters. I love this wing, the patrioticness of it, the old Biggs wing itself, and as we approach where Biggs was, I'll point it out, because like all 30 of the entrances to the massive store were walled off, and you can kind of see the old label scars if you look hard enough. By 2017, Forest Fair Village was becoming the prime candidate for dead mall YouTube videos, as the mall only really featured Kohl's, Bass Pro Shops, an arcade, and a few other services in its otherwise abandoned state. This, plus the already hostile security, led to the mall becoming a prime suspect of shady activity, like a security guard that flipped out on a visitor, threatening to cut them with a knife for taking pictures.
Chambers says she and a friend were drawn to the Cincinnati Mall, now known as Forest Fair Village, last Tuesday. She wanted to see what she calls a dead mall with barely any stores left.
It's really cool. It's actually a really nice place. It's just sad, eerie, you know.
But she says a few photographs of stores past angered Edmund Cunningham, a man police say is a security guard. His anger apparent in video captured by Chambers.
Oh yeah, I tried to block the license plate.
We're not doing anything. Get away from my car.
Chambers says Cunningham followed them and berated them, telling them to leave, even pulling a knife.
I still got a gun.
Cool. Does it make bigger?
Out of my state before
I live in Ohio.
OMC code 4576.
Oh my God, dude.
Cunningham was convicted on animal cruelty charges in 2018 after Middletown police say he admitted to killing 8 kittens and throwing them in his freezer. Another woman told us he also confronted her for taking photos.
He has a knife.
Shut the up and get the off the property.
Oh yeah, you're gonna pull a knife with kids. Great.
For Chambers, the encounter is worse than any shopping trip could have been.
Oh, I'll show you a lunatic.
I know you will, and I'll record you doing it.
I'll crush the phone out of your hand.
Don't touch me, dude. Hey.
Get the out of here!
And why was he employed there? They have to know that he had done what he had done in the past.
Now, according to police, Cunningham said he ran out of medication and his paranoia surfaced. He also said that the knife was simply a training knife. We tried to get in touch with his attorney. So far, we have not heard back.
In 2017, a brokerage team called Newmark attempted to sell the mall for $50 million, that of which it definitely was not worth, as mold and decay had begun to set in. A Christian media company was interested in setting up shop in the mall, however would ultimately turn it down. Around this time, numerous code violations were found on the property in 2020, including busted pipes, broken out lights, sealed off emergency exits, graffiti and vandalism, several skylights that were leaking heavily, and a decaying abandoned parking structure that was still open to the public. That year, Butler County Land Bank would apply for a $9.5 million loan to demolish the mall. At this time, the only tenants left were Kohl's and Bass Pro Shops, both having no mall entrance, and an arcade, which was the only true mall tenant left. And that leaves us where we are today. Recently, there was news that the mall's last tenant, Arcade Legacy, closed on August 28th, leaving the mall 100% vacant. However, I haven't seen anything yet proving that the mall is closed forever due to this. And so, Cincinnati Mall, or Forest Fair Village, sits in an abandoned state, slowly decaying, with its empty storefronts reflecting the once elegant shopping destination it was supposed to be, just quietly awaiting that depressing relief of the wrecking ball. As we round out here and drive around the outside, I wasn't quite done yet. You see, when I was here back in May, the arcade was still open, and their big thing was that they're open until midnight, which would leave the mall open until then, and I just had to get a piece of that action. While not a prolonged visit, I still headed in around 11 at night, and let me tell you, it felt otherworldly. But first, a drive around the exterior, and we'll let the credits roll here. But stick around, don't touch that dial. Hey everybody, thanks for sticking around. I know we didn't see the whole mall at night, but I wanted to give the poor security guard a break. Plus, I felt kind of unsafe. I want to thank you all so much for watching tonight's episode. Forest Fair was a mall I'll never forget, and I thank you all for joining me on this adventure, no matter how long it took to come out. I wonder what'll happen to this place, and what its future holds. Will Forest Fair one day, possibly, in a way be revitalized again? Or was it doomed from construction? Let me know down below. As we finish out here, I was forced to walk through the parking lot to my car, as the doors were locked and I had to go the long way. This mall doesn't have parking lot lights for some reason, or they're not on, so it's kind of sketchy walking through the pitch blackness with the enormous dark building next to you. If you guys enjoy my Dead Mall content, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on future Dead Malls episodes. Make sure to head over to the Patreon and support me, and I'll send you a monthly Dead Mall Polaroid taken and signed by me. Next week, we'll be heading to the Southeast Metro for a classic gate mall. Guess which one we'll be at, and I'll shout you out in the next episode. Anyways, until then, have yourselves a lovely day, and peace out, guys. See you later.
Okay, so just a little personal vlog thing. So I got locked in because the door I went in was locked. I guess the security guard went around and locked all the doors because I feel really bad. He's having a difficult time trying to contain everyone. There's a ton of, you'll probably see him in the videos, but there's a ton of teenagers just going around doing whatever they want, and he's trying to keep them all in the arcade since the whole mall is supposed to be closed after 9. So I had him let me out over here, and now I'm walking back to where I parked in this definitely the creepiest mall parking lot I've ever been to. I mean, not only is the whole building dark and overgrown, but there's no lights. Any amount of shady activity can go down here. All the parking lot lights are off. Super, super creepy.